Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you would, it was nice to have an opportunity to take a little bit of break. I don't know about you, but after the soldier athletes were introduced and listening to all that they did, I was tired just listening to all of their activities. So we're very pleased now to move on to the first panel of day two, and a vitally important one. You heard General Perna singing the praises of the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, and so if your ears were ringing, General McConville, that was the AMC commander sucking up to you. He did a masterful job of that. But we're ready for our next panel, Future Vertical Lift. And unsurprisingly, the senior mentor for this activity is the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, General James McConville. And moderating today's panel is Lieutenant General Bill Phillips, United States Army retired, Vice President for Special Operating Forces and Huntsville Operations from the Boeing Company. General McConville, General Phillips, off to you, sir. Thank you very, very much. Warm welcome for our aviation panel.
First of all, General Helm, thanks to you and to AUSA and the Army leadership for bringing this forum together. And on behalf of our senior mentor, General McConville, and as a panel moderator, I first want to really thank the team for coming together, all our panel members for being here today, because this is a critically important topic. And if you think about our theme, modernizing and equipping America's Army for today and tomorrow, we clearly have the A-team that's up here ready to share and discuss future vertical lift. For just some admin comments as far as the panel will be executed, each panel member will have about 5 to 7 minutes. At the end, we should have at least 30 minutes, so I want everyone out there to please think about questions for the panel, and we'll gather those and have the panel members address each and every one. It's my honor to introduce our senior mentor for future vertical lift, General McConville. James McConville assumed duties as the 36th Vice Chief of Staff of the Army on June 16, 2017. He is a graduate of West Point and holds a Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering from Georgia Tech. He has commanded at every level within the Army, most notably Commanding General of the 101st Airborne Division, Air Assault, where he also served as the commander of Combined Joint Task Force 101, Operation Enduring Freedom. Also commanded 4th Brigade, 1st Cav Division, OIF. His key staff assignments include Deputy Chief of Staff G1, Chief of Legislative Liaison in the Pentagon, G3 of the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault. General McConville is the senior Army aviator, qualified in Longbow Apache, Kiowa Warrior, and AH-6 and others. He is a Master Army aviator. He has 3 children, as we were talking yesterday, all 3 of them are deployed today in support of our nation overseas. General Wally Rugen is a Deputy Commanding General Support, 7th Infantry Division, and Director, Cross-Functional Team, Future Vertical Lift. He is a graduate of West Point. In his career, he has served in Korea, Fort Campbell with the 101st Airborne Battalion Air Assault, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment Airborne, where he deployed to both OIF and OEF. He also served in SOCOM. He commanded 3rd Battalion, 160th SOAR. He also commanded 2nd Combat Aviation Brigade in Korea, and most recently served as the Chief of Aviation Force Development Division and Director of Materiel, Army G8. He's a Master Aviator. Brigadier General Thomas Todd assumed duties as Program Executive Officer Aviation on 12 January 2017. He previously served as the RDECOM Deputy Commanding General Natick Systems. He is a graduate of Citadel. He is a OH-58 and UH-60 maintenance test pilot and holds a master's degree of science in contracting management from FIT. He has numerous operational assignments, including Fort Hood in Korea. He joined the Army Acquisition Corps in 1996, is certified in contracting and program management. He has served as the Assistant Product Manager for Air Warrior, Product Manager for CH-47F Chinook, and Project Manager for Utility Helicopters Project Office. General Todd also served on the Army staff in ASALT. He is a senior Army aviator. Jeff Drezner is a senior policy researcher at RAND Corporation. He has over 30 years of professional experience conducting policy analysis on a wide range of issues, including aerospace, industrial policy, and defense acquisition policy and reform. His recent projects include rapid acquisition approaches. Jeff formerly served as the Associate Director of RAND Project Air Force's Acquisition Program and has been a participant in the Pentagon-sponsored program in support of OSD AT&L. He has a Ph.D. in political science from Claremont University. Mike Hirschberg assumed duties as the American Helicopter Society Executive Director on June 1st, 2011, after 20 years of serving in the aerospace industry. He represents the vertical flight technical community and advocates for the advancement of the vertical flight research and technology. He previously served as a principal aerospace engineer with Centra Technology in support of DARPA's advanced aircraft and rotorcraft systems. He has authored or co-authored over 100 publications and 3 books. He holds a BS in aerospace engineering from Virginia and a mechanical engineering degree from Catholic University. He also speaks fluent German. Dr. Gerry Graves is managing director of the Vertical Lift Consortium. The VLC mission is to work collaboratively with the U.S. government to develop and transition innovative vertical lift technologies to leverage over 110 member organizations, including defense and academia. Dr. Graves has more than 30 years' experience in forming and leading collaborative R&D programs while working with Advanced Technology International. Dr. Graves taught graduate-level systems engineering and program management courses at the Citadel. He has served for over 5 years as a F-14 flight officer. And ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to turn it over to our senior mentor, General McConville, our Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. Sir.
Well, thanks, Bill. And what I'd like to do is just kind of set the stage as we talk about the future of vertical lift. And I think there's a couple of ways of doing it. And as we look to the future, there's a couple of ways to get to the future. One is to start where we're at right now and move from where we are. The other way is to go into the future, look at 20, 30 years, get an idea of what we think we need to have, and then move back from that position. And really that's the strategy that we're taking in the Army right now is, we would argue, and if the Chief was here, he would tell you that we have the world's greatest aviation force with the world's greatest helicopters today. The Apache helicopter is the biggest killer on the battlefield, and what our CH-47s and Blackhawks are doing, along with our Gray Eagles, are supporting the ground force throughout the world in a way that we are very happy with. However, we shouldn't be satisfied with where we sit. We're using helicopters to do really primarily 3 things in the Army. We're using them to find things, we're using them to kill things, and we're using them to move things. And as we go to the future and we look out 20, 30 years from now, what we see is we still think that we're going to be finding things, we still think that we're going to need vertical lift to kill things, and we still think that we're going to need to be moving both troops and cargo throughout the battlefield. The difference is how we'll do that. The difference is the conditions that we're going to operate under. And so, we kind of have a strategy, and we're doing it right now. We're incrementally improving the great helicopters we have. They all start off as alpha models, and pretty soon you work your way through. Some are Echoes, some are Foxtrots, some are Blocks, and we've kind of incrementally improved the aircraft we have. But when we talk about future vertical lift, what we're talking about is where is the leap ahead technology? Where is the technology that's going to give us overmatch on the battlefield? Where's the technology that 10, 20, 30 years from now is going to make us the most lethal force on the battlefield, where we have tremendous overmatch over adversaries? We can operate in contested domain warfare as we go forward. And that's what we're trying to work right now. And that's what we're going to discuss as we go forward. And so I've seen some incredible things happen. I've been very, very impressed with some of the PowerPoint briefs I've seen. But I would tell you, our soldiers can't fly PowerPoint. Our soldiers can't fight with PowerPoint. And so we're going to challenge all of industry is to work closely with us and develop the future vertical lift that we need for our soldiers in the future. And Wally will kind of lay that out as we go forward. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. General Ham, AUSA, thanks for a great venue to discuss our passion in vertical lift. So really appreciate it. The CFT started last November. Again, just like every other CFT, I have folks from across the enterprise to have a laser focus on S&T, laser focused on requirements, contracting, testing, costing, and all those things that go into making large programs like ACAT 1Ds successful. And so we're looking at forming this team to do things in parallel, or in the past we've done things sequentially. We're looking at being innovative and agile, but we're also looking at the mundane things that we have to do in every program and making sure that we just boil the efficiency into that as hard as we can, and having a team that's laser focused across those specialties has been powerful to watch. So what are we going to do? You know, the Vice already alluded to it, but we really want to build an aviation force that's optimized and lethal for large-scale combat operations. It's going to be dominant in that lethality and overmatch that we enjoy today, but we need for tomorrow: reach, protection, and then also the ability to be adaptable. So we got to be able to rapidly upgrade these machines and these aircraft. So aviation has been an asymmetric advantage for our Army and the Joint Force really since Vietnam and LZ X-ray, and we're not giving that up just because the air domain is tough. We're going to compete in the air domain, and we're not yielding it to anyone. You know, truly the ground force and the fires team, they need us in the air to bring that air-ground integration that is a powerful asymmetric advantage for our Army and the Joint Force. And so as we look to the future, we see a number of challenges for Army aviation that we have to contest with. We have to be able to operate in contested airspace. We have to be able to be lethal at extended ranges and maintain our vertical lift overmatch and dominance. We have to improve the human-machine interface and offload the cockpit loading with these with the holistic situational awareness, where we can see a lot of autonomous things done for the crew so they can focus on dominating an area or corridor for the Joint Force. We want to demonstrate mature autonomous decision-making. And lastly, but probably one of the most important things, is we want to support ultra-reliable designs that give us maintenance-free operating periods, but also address our life cycle costs. So cost is one of the kings in what we're looking at doing. So task and purpose: our task is to accelerate the selected disruptive technologies that are going to address those challenges, and the challenges are going to keep us viable in the air domain. So we have 4 lines of effort associated with that task and purpose. First, advanced UAS. So we view UAS as a purpose-built area, not a multi-purpose, one-size-fits-all. We think we're going to have multiple form factors, but predominantly we're looking for key attributes that can then allow us to dominate in contested airspace and IADS. So low observable, survivable, or if they're inexpensive, throwaway, swarming, runway independent, and the ability to deliver targeting for long-range precision fires at operational and tactical distances, and also non-lethal effects, so think electronic attack. We want to be able to stimulate, allow the enemy in a contested airspace to turn on their radars. We want to be able to spoof those radars, jam those radars, hunt those radars, and kill those radars. The next line of effort is our future armed or attack reconnaissance aircraft. So again, we want it sized to hide in radar clutter, also sized to operate in the canyons of urban canyons of megacities. Needs to be a clean sheet design, optionally manned, so a lot of autonomy baked into this future aircraft with improved reach and survivability. And these two would form our advanced team. And this advanced team needs to deepen the interoperability between our ground force and fires team to be able to detect and deliver lethal effects, assess those effects, and reattack if need be. Next line of effort would be our future long-range assault helicopter. Again, this helicopter is going to have the speed and reach is defined as the reach, which is the speed, range, and endurance to, once we do dominate an area or corridor, that this will be agile and have the speed to flow through that window of opportunity. It needs to have significant increased protection, operate from sanctuary, and just, again, be something that exploits our windows of opportunity. And the last is an open system approach amongst all these clean sheet designs. So when we think open system architecture, we want an architecture that is both open and resilient, government designed and defined specs that you as industry teammates plug into so we can shorten our typical 5 to 7 years upgrade into something much shorter. And I think lastly, just, you know, when it comes to aviation in our portfolio, we take pride in paying our own way. And so affordability and being good stewards of every taxpayer dollar is forefront on our minds. So with that, I'll stop. 30 seconds. I yield.
All right. I think this isn't working, so can you hear me?
Yeah, they're on.
I think they're on.
They're on.
Good. All right, thanks. So I just used up your 30 seconds there, Wally, so I can't go over. But Thomas Todd, for those of you that don't know me, certainly been in the PEO a long time. Looking forward to being part of really what is, I think, groundbreaking goals by the Army that senior Army leadership has set forth for us in the third priority within the CFTs. Specifically, PO Aviation has largely been involved in, as the Vice mentioned earlier, in largely upgrade programs over the past, I would say, 10 years. Those programs have been necessary, and I would say we have a workforce really that's attuned to that, where we will seek to grow our workforce and where we'll seek to become really key partners in the process is how do we transition technologies out of science and technology, out of demonstrations and experimentations once the CFT deems it necessary and the Army makes a decision to move forward. The workforce is obviously ready to do so. We have done it on small scales. I'll give you a few examples rather quickly. We've done that on certainly the Improved Turbine Engine Program, which came out of the 8 Advanced Affordable Turbine Engine Science Project. And so we have that as well as the composite rotor blade transitions and a few other things that we've done. But as you largely know, there is great difficulty in transitioning programs from science and technology. I think that's the beauty of the Army Futures Command. It'll give the horsepower to really decisions that need to be made, resourcing that needs to be provided, leadership from Wally and the CFT on integrating all that across all domains in the process that's required. And then we'll actually have, I think, a really high chance of success at bridging that gap, which has become so difficult in our business. I will say this, as we pursue new technologies, we have talked significantly about, and the Vice mentioned PowerPoint briefs, soldiers can't fight them. Neither can we develop them if they're not worth the weight that they're printed on. So what I would say to this is, in industry is we are looking for your candor, we are looking for your feedback, we are looking for your participation. But we also need to know what you actually can accomplish. We don't necessarily need to hear what you may want to bake a little bit longer in S&T because we're after getting, and Wally mentioned this earlier, we're after getting technologies really transitioned into tests where we can finalize affordability, producibility, reliability, and survivability, which is really what you would hand me at the end of the day so that we can deliver it to the soldier in a relatively short order. That has been difficult. That is tremendously difficult. Commercial aviation, the fixed-wing business, is largely driven by the commercial sector, fixed-wing technology. Helicopter technology, however, is driven by us, the military sector, in large part. There are some civilian applications and civil applications that we do take advantage of, but advancing technology and vertical lift is dependent on us, those of us in this room today. So I would ask for your continued commitment and realism in whatever we decide to make decisions on going forward. There are a few principles that we should apply that I would say are characteristics of successful development programs that we've seen, whether it be the Fox model, the Mike model, clean sheet purchases off the commercial marketplace in the way of Lakotas, fixed wings, or even independently invested in development efforts like Gray Eagle. And that is as follows. Integrity is paramount in all that we really present and discuss. There's no way that we can do this if there's not integrity in each of the really goals set forth and decisions we make. Really, humans, keep the human and the soldier at the centerpiece of everything that you propose. It is certainly paramount as we achieve the objectives that Wally laid out, that we understand that it is always and always will be about the soldier in our business. Do never lose sight of the objective. In other words, don't get distracted ultimately by a lot of stray voltage or shiny objects. Stay focused, keep the team really on track. Only those people who can say yes have the authority to say no. In our business, we have a lot of opinions. We have a lot of people that write articles. We have a lot of people that really, quite frankly, feel like they have decision authority, but the decision authority resides here, and it resides within the Army leadership. And so while we are interested, we're going to try and keep our team obviously focused and only deal with those that actually have authorities. Ownership, everybody on the team. Ultimately, what we need is when you do say something, be willing to put your name on the line. We need a commitment, and this gets a little bit to integrity, but more ownership. Take ownership of what kind of claims you're making, because we are going to rely on them, and we may call you on them. Make sure that you produce and field when good enough, not when it's as good as it possibly could be. We absolutely have to make sure that we get this capability to the soldier and that we do not spend double the amount of time achieving the last necessarily 10% of capability when, quite frankly, 90% was good enough. You've heard this echoed, buy what you fly. I think you're going to see that in some of the strategies laid forth, and already have that in some of our strategies as we pursue JMR. And then know when to quit if necessary. So we will be making decisions. We always won't necessarily transition everything that you propose, but we look forward to hearing from you. We encourage you to engage the CFT specifically as Wally integrates, and we look forward to making sure that whatever we decide to put in the hands of the soldier is a success every time that he has to pull that trigger. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, and it's an honor to be here, part of this panel. RAND was asked 2 years ago by the J8 to look at management constructs for future vertical lift. By management constructs, I mean sort of the organizational structure, roles, responsibilities. Within that structure, internal and external reporting lines, that kind of thing. The emphasis was, if I could turn our objective a little on its side, the objective was, does a joint program structure make sense for FVL? So we looked at the history of joint programs, which is decidedly mixed in terms of cost, schedule, performance outcomes. And then we looked at various structures. So a couple of key findings. One thing that I thought was interesting is that joint and commonality are not the same kind of thing. Usually we think about the benefits of joint as a reduction in duplication across the services, or some form of cost savings by that reduced duplication. Actually, a lot of the savings comes from the commonality itself. The commonality is sort of more organic, and there are sort of natural incentives for certain kinds of things to be common across the services. Part of that is from historical experience. You're not actually forcing services to do something jointly doesn't usually succeed, so it should be voluntary. The joint management structure itself adds a lot of complexity to what's already a very complex management challenge. And so that's a high cost. And in fact, there's from our data, there's a pretty significant joint cost growth premium, if you will. In general, joint programs tend to have higher cost growth than single service programs. A lot of challenges in managing a joint program, and again, these are on top of the challenges managing a complex weapon system to begin with. And in particular, aligning the requirements, schedule, budget, and keeping that alignment over time. FVL isn't we're going to be done in 5 years. This is a multi-decade initiative. That's a lot of time to maintain that level of alignment. The single most important aspect, I think, of this comes down to requirements. So I think the lessons from history is that if your requirement isn't the same, and I said the same, not similar, a joint structure probably doesn't make sense. A purely joint structure doesn't make sense. The model for that would be the F-35. There isn't a single best management construct that's applicable to FVL. I think there's a lot of different, the different capability sets that are being talked about have different characteristics. Those programs, as they unfold, may need slightly different management constructs that are tailored to the needs of each particular program. I would also, and I think I hinted at this, we couldn't find any evidence of actual savings from joint programs. And it's partly because the data isn't collected that way, and partly because most of the time those savings don't actually materialize. Unfortunately, we could also not find evidence of savings from commonality. Those savings probably do exist, but again, the data isn't collected and put in one place where we can actually see that, which is, I think, something that the FVL community has an opportunity early in the planning stages as part of the AOA, for instance, to look at historical savings from commonality in programs, V-22, UH-60, for instance. In the end, what we did, we recommended a lead service management structure for FVL for each program. But if you really do want to take advantage of the potential for commonality across the services and also across the different FVL programs, you probably need some kind of umbrella, higher level organization, both within the Army and within the DoD enterprise, to coordinate those kinds of common elements. So that's our basic findings. There is a published report that is available on the RAND website, or you can let me know and I can send it to you. And with that, I'm giving you extra time.
Great, thanks. Let me also say it's a real honor and pleasure to be here today and with this distinguished panel of speakers. Again, my name is Mike Hirschberg. I'm the director of AHS, the Vertical Flight Society. We were actually formed 75 years ago, in 1943, just as the Army was ordering its first lot of production helicopters, the Sikorsky XR-4. So Sikorsky, the Army, got together with other industry members from Piasecki and Bell, the scientific community, the other services, academia, and said, this is a new technology, we need to come together and help advance vertical flight. And so that's what we've been doing for 75 years. Our first honorees were Igor Sikorsky and Colonel Frank Gregory from the Army, one of the early Army leaders in developing the helicopter. So we bring together industry, academia, and government to try and tackle the toughest challenges in vertical flight. So it's a pleasure for me to represent the scientific community, the developers across industry, academia, and government today. So there's been probably 2 decades of studies and analysis going into what's now FVL, and basically I think that combined the scientific community says we can do this, we can provide this extended operational reach, we can provide incredible capabilities, action at the X in support of the soldier. And there's mentioned before, there's technology flowing from military into civil, and there's also the other way. And you look at things like the Black Hawk going into the S-92 Super Hawk, now being fielded, decades later as the VH-92 Presidential. But the U.S. military has the best vertical flight aircraft in the world, bar none. No one else in the world can develop the technologies that we have in things like the Apache and the Black Hawk and the Chinook that are fielded today. And industry, academia, government, the scientific community, we're leaning forward for a future vertical lift. The government expenditure for JMR is a couple $100 million in total. It's been publicized that there's about $100 million going to each of the 2 main competitors, main S&T developers, Bell and the Sikorsky Boeing team, as well as some funding to Karam aircraft and AVX aircraft. But industry is putting in hundreds of millions of dollars more to be able to prove that this can be done. You look at $300 million that Sikorsky's investing in the Raider, probably more than that each for Bell and the Sikorsky Boeing teams for Valor and Defiant. And you're looking at across industry probably close to $1.5 billion of dollars that's going into the current demonstrations to try and convert those PowerPoint slides into something that can actually be seen, not taken to the fight, but demonstrating what the state of the art is, what can industry do today, and provide capabilities for the soldier for the future. We talked about cost and affordability. So one of the big things is, yes, we can go these really super long ranges, and a lot's being talked about speed, the speed of future vertical lift, and I think probably more important than speed is probably that range, but those things also drive size. So in order to keep the affordability, there does need to be an appetite suppressant, as stated, in order to keep the sizes down and make them affordable. And then once those requirements are set, to lock them in over the decade so that industry can produce those products without chasing shiny objects or other things to make them better, but maybe unaffordable and not converge. So it's really constancy of purpose and achieving those transitions that have been so elusive in the past from the S&T community or the acquisition community to actually get into the field. Comanche was an incredible program that was an incredible aircraft, but not delivered. So where those technologies are being used in things like future vertical lift, but we need to work together in order to be able to deliver these capabilities. And that is one thing I just really want to state, is that industry and government can work together, and it's really that collaborative, that collaboration that will do the best to bring these products together. And venues such as this, bringing the warfighter and industry together, are key. Events like we have AHS, we have an annual technical forum, and to be able to get the scientific community, the folks from RDECOM, to come to attend the world's largest technology event for vertical flight and see what the rest of the world is doing, see what is out there, is really important, and something that I'd really encourage the Army and leadership to encourage, is that interaction with industry and government. Working with our brethren as part of the Vertical Lift Consortium, that's one of the key takeaways, is industry and government working together can really achieve tremendous results. Gerry?
Good morning. My message for you today is that collaboration is crucial, but it's not easy. It is going to be crucial for success in the future vertical lift initiative, and that was recognized in the memorandum from Undersecretary Carter when he launched the Future Vertical Lift Initiative. He recognized the importance of the role that industry would play in the success of the Future Vertical Lift Initiative. Responding to that, industry got together and formed the Vertical Lift Consortium in 2010. The mission of the VLC is to work with the government collaboratively to develop and transition technologies for vertical lift rapidly and affordably to get them to the warfighter. That's a mission that's constant for us, and it gives us an objective that certainly lines up with the FVL-CFT and with the Army. We're organized as a company with over 110 member organizations, arranged in categories based on the sector they're in. So we have the OEMs are members, the large defense contractors, the engine companies, the small vertical takeoff and landing companies, the suppliers, and other niche companies. We're organized that way to give each of those sectors a voice. They all have representation on our board of directors, and that's essential too. We can't just be run by the larger companies there. The importance of what we do is, one of the important things we do is to bring in these innovative companies that will bring new technology and help them in doing business and bringing their value to the Future Vertical Lift Initiative. The Army's looking for a better way of doing business, so is industry. And one of the tools that's been provided to us is called the Other Transaction Agreement. I'm sure many of you are familiar with OTAs. It is something that was developed to give flexibility and to decrease cycle time in providing new capabilities to the warfighter. It does give us some opportunities to collaborate in ways that have not been so easy to do in the past. So, for example, the VLC has collaborated with the government in information sharing. We've had workshops with the FVL requirements IPT. Colonel Bentley came and met with us a number of times. And honestly, it was one of the most exciting things I've seen in my career to see industry coming together with the government, hearing what the capabilities they're considering are, and providing feedback. So they're being informed, but they're also letting the government know what the art of the possible is and suggesting some new things that are out there. We can do that under the authority of the other transaction agreement. We've also collaborated with the government, with the Joint Council of Colonels, and looking at such areas. We worked with Jeff on commonality. We gathered an opinion from industry on what it is, when it might work, what are some of the issues. And we also, not only did we give a majority view, but we also presented the view of those that didn't necessarily agree. But we provided that back to the government. It's valuable information. Another way we collaborate. We've collaborated with the Future Vertical Lift S&T IPT. They presented to the VLC over 10 of their technology roadmaps. And then collectively, the VLC prepared a report with a variety of views on those roadmaps, recommendations back to the government. This type of collaboration, I think, is essential to being successful with the Future Vertical Lift Initiative. As Mike mentioned, we collaborate with AHS in education and promotion of the Future Vertical Lift as an initiative. The other transaction authority also provides us with some other ways to collaborate. For example, we can, with some support from the government, bring together subject matter experts to meet with the Army in talking about and developing specifications for things such as the Joint Common Architecture that General Rugen referred to. We've got a project going on now that's looking at attempting to define that interface between the platform and the mission system. A real challenge, but we're doing it as an industry group. It's not an individual company. And universities, they play a key role in these as well. Lastly, we are able to execute research and development projects that are focused on prototypes. This is a key piece of doing business in a new way. It enables the government to more quickly get projects underway. We've seen, nominally, we see 3 to 6 months from presentation of the requirement to the VLC to on contract and underway. So we're able to do things more quickly because of some of the latitude that we get from working under an other transaction agreement and having our members sign up to a base agreement in advance. It does reduce the cycle time, and that's very important. It's very important. It's not easy. If you think about the VLC, we've got companies that are fierce competitors. We've got companies that have the prime OEM relationship, prime supplier relationship. We've got to be sensitive to those things. But we can undertake work together as an industry, providing back to the government and executing these projects in a new and different way that allows us to achieve the rapidity and affordability that we need to see with the VLC. I see that my time has run over, but I think that this is, our members are all in with Future Vertical Lift, and we look forward to working with the CFT as it moves forward. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the panel members for your comments. They did a great job because we have, sir, we have quite a few minutes left for questions. And I'll get to the first one. The first one really centers on cost. And, sir, you mentioned it, and many of our panel members address cost as well. And in your role as the Vice Chief, you spend considerable time, I know, trying to make sure that our Army and our soldiers are equipped with the best equipment, trained, ready to go and fight and win on the field of battle. When it comes to Future Vertical Lift and given the priority of that program, what are some of the challenges you see today and future challenges associated with keeping FVL on track and funding going forward?
Yeah, I think, you've had a chance to see that we have 6 priorities, and we want to modernize within all these priorities as we go forward. And so cost is key, and not only the cost for development, but the cost for procurement and the cost to actually maintain the aircraft as we go forward. And we're into mass as far as the amount of aircraft that we have. So we are not looking at, quite frankly, procuring expensive aircraft. And as we have this discussion, we want the aircraft priced at the same range that they are right now. We want them to be able to operate at the same price per hour that they're operating right now. And I guess the philosophy we have, we used to pay maybe $1,000 for a black and white TV, but technology has increased, and now we can get a color TV with a lot more capability. And that's kind of how we're approaching the cost equation. All these programs are competing against each other. And they're competing, we have a top line. We have so much for modernization in procurement. And, as people ask, what are the big decisions? The Undersecretary talked about decisions that can be made. Decisions are going to be made on future vertical lift and some of the other programs is when do we shift? When do we get to the point where the technology is such, we've developed the program, and it provides such overmatch that we're going to switch from what we would call the legacy program and move into the new program and go forward. What we're not going to be able to do is afford everything. And what we're not going to be able to do is spend large amount of money developing things that are not going to get into the hands of the soldiers. So that's the challenge we face, and we look forward to working with you on this challenge.
Sir, I'd ask any of the other panel members if you want to discuss anything on cost or challenges you see ahead.
Yeah, so I'd like to say that I think with manufacturing technology improvements, that industry can definitely improve on cost per pound as in the past, and serve for looking at aircraft that are cheaper than today, certainly with improvements in engine technology, with ITEP and FATE, and just designing with designing maintainability and sustainability in the aircraft. I think they can be more supportable. I think the real challenge is what you're comparing. If you're comparing 20,000 pound Black Hawk to a 30 or 35,000 pounds replacement, then it's probably not the right thing. But if you're comparing it to an aircraft of similar size, I think that those cost targets for affordability could also be met.
Thank you. Next question. Is the intent of FVL to replace current platforms or add to them? And General Todd, this was to you, but we'd also open that up to others. But Thomas?
Okay. I'll start by saying yes to both. Ultimately, in 1978, we procured an aircraft called a Black Hawk, and it was there to replace the Huey. And we kept Hueys an awfully long time. So I would say that what we envision is a set of new real leap-ahead capabilities in this regard with these technologies that are going to really provide us, some have said 10x. It's really about that overreach and that overmatch that we require. Will we still maintain some of the current platforms into the future and beyond? Absolutely. So there will be a mix, undoubtedly. Wally, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I just highlight. I think General Gaylor and his team are working hard. Everything's on the table as far as the organizational structure. Taking a hard look at modularity, and it's certainly at Fort Rucker's wheelhouse. But we have our laser focus on that as well, and that's through General Gaylor's team.
Yeah, I was just kind of smiling because when I drive past the 101st Combat Aviation Brigade headquarters, there's pedestals, and there's an OH-58 sitting on that pedestal. There's UH-1 sitting on that pedestal. There's a Cobra sitting on that pedestal, and now there's an OH-58 Delta sitting on that pedestal. So, those are all the aircraft that many of us grew up with as we go forward. And really, when does that happen? Those are the type of decisions that are going to be made. And it's really going to be based on when the technology is ready. And as we look at the threat, and we look at the environment, what's going to give us that overmatch that we're going to put in our hands and soldiers. And as soon as we can get it, and as soon as we can afford it, That's what we're going to do. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No. It's going to happen, hopefully we're not sitting around and someone else is sitting up here as a vice, maybe a lieutenant, and it's 2050, and hopefully some of these aircraft are sitting on the pedestals of his headquarters as we go forward in the future.
Thank you, panel. Next question, and sir, I would ask you to maybe address this first, but I open that up to all the panel because this is something that many of us have lived through. There's several questions that relate directly to this, but looking at DoD 5000 and a list of the multitude of studies and documents designed to keep programs on track, the requirements are significant going forward. Probably safe to say programs such as Comanche, Crusader, FCS, JCA, ARH, etc., did a wonderful job submitting all required documents, yet they all failed to get to the soldier. How does the Army and industry meet statutory requirements to keep FEL on track and yet deliver on time to the performance that our soldiers desire or need?
Well, I think, one of the reasons that we've stood up the cross-functional teams, one of the reasons we're standing up Futures Command, one of the reasons that the Secretary and specifically the Chief, General Milley, have been so adamant about trying to align the organization so we're ready for combat or ready for development is precisely because of that. When you trace the requirement process and you look at how many people get a vote on requirements and how long that takes to develop, and then as it gets into the acquisition world and the ability to refine those requirements and continue to develop as we go forward, it just takes way too long, and things change, and we do not have the agility in the system to allow senior leaders to come in and work with industry and collaborate on industry as things have changed to get it to what we need. And as we move forward, we're hoping and we believe that the structure we're going to in place is going to allow us to overcome some of the obstacles that we've seen in the past.
Sure, let me take a shot too. So I think I'll just point to the GMRTD. Again, that's a tech demonstrator, so that's kind of where it starts. I think we're going to, well, I know we're going to work with maturing technologies in S&T where our authorities are a bit more agile and a bit more innovative, and we can move with more speed. I think also that the requirements process is, for these 6 priorities laid out by the Secretary and the Chief, the bureaucracy is really flattened when we talk about those requirements. And so the requirements process is just not going to take the years that the Comanche or FCS requirements process took. The senior leaders are committed to giving us time. I will just tell you, I met 7 times with the Vice last week. And that's a good thing, and it's a good thing. But what I'll tell you is this, is we are getting access to our senior leaders for decisions on these priorities because the focus is laser focus. Competitive prototyping, we got to do more of that. I think the success of JMRTD and the wisdom of our leaders back when that kicked off is what we want to leverage. And so it is different. Is it still hard? Certainly. But we have a different focus and certainly a few different methods, a few different tools in the toolkit.
Now, I'll just echo what Wally was saying, and it gets back to a point I made about successful acquisition programs. If you can't say yes, then you can't tell me no. If you're not a decision authority, you're just an advisor. And so while we've had rightly intended initiatives that have achieved ultimately through what was intended to be really good system engineering, they've achieved ultimately unintended consequences and slowed programs, created drag, and not allowed things to get in the hands of the soldiers in the past. I think what is ultimately a revolutionary approach by the Army to stand up a very coordinated unity of command effort, obviously with a lot of supporting organizations, is going to push through a lot of the issues we've had in the past. And I'll leave it at that. I'll just say, watch and see Oh, we do. Gentlemen want to.
Gentlemen, anything?
Yeah, I guess from an analyst point of view, I don't want to be too skeptical or cynical, but I would caution about overreach, especially in terms of the requirements and all the different things that we would like to hang on the first program or programs that come out of the FVL initiatives. It's not that you can't have all of that eventually, you just can't have it all at once.
No, we are very informed on that, and we want the alpha model. We don't want the Mike model. So that's great. That's great wisdom.
So you can figure out what's important.
Yep.
Do that one first. Do sort of a parallel development of all the things that you want next, and then figure out how to feed them into the program. I think that gets you what you want eventually, and it also accelerates getting capabilities into the field.
Couldn't agree more. Mike?
Yeah, so if I could also add to that as well, I think probably Comanche was that overreach, and then the of technologies and lightweight and get it in there, and then kind of death by 1,000 cuts. Other things like air rage and those failed acquisition programs aren't unique to the Army. Certainly the Air Force and Navy have had quite a number of helicopter procurements that have been tied up in shifting requirements and a lack of understanding between the government and the industry as far as what actually really needs to be developed. So it really is focus, collaboration. One service that actually has a pretty good record as far as procurement is the Marine Corps. You look at the V-22, the F-35B, the 53K. They've got some of the most advanced aircraft in the world, and that's by focusing and collaborating and seeing it through the decades and decades to deliver a product for the warfighter.
Those are quite expensive, though.
Yes.
We want to be a little different.
So they don't have a lot of funding, but they're able to
They
get.
have a lot of funding because they bought real expensive stuff, but anyway.
Dr. Graves, anything?
My opinion.
Yes. I would add that the importance of time to market cannot be underestimated. The risk goes up dramatically the longer it takes to get the program out there. The risk of losing support with Congress or changes in Army leadership and losing part of your industrial base if they're not getting a reasonable level of work to undertake. So I think there needs to be a lot of attention paid to time to market.
That's a great point to make also, the industrial base and the importance of that. Mr. Drezner, you talked a little bit about jointness and commonality. Under what conditions does joint program management make sense?
So I think the basic condition is that the requirements are the same, right? And the F-35 would be the model of how not to do joint, because it turns out that there are 3 different airplanes there. For different missions, they have different requirements. So that's the fundamental success factor, if you will. The second one, I think, is that participation should be voluntary, meaning that the services that want to participate in a joint program are doing it because they see a benefit to participating. They're sort of self-motivated, self-organizing, and they're willing to commit to the program. Historically, one of the problems with joint programs is that there isn't any penalty for pulling out. And that's a problem. So voluntary participation, at least you know that they want to be there. And as part of that, I mentioned sort of the technology overreach and sort of incremental development or parallel development, I think helps a lot as well. I think the most successful version of a joint program historically has been a lead service structure with where you have participation in the program office and even in the approval chains from the other services, say in deputy positions. So they're still in senior positions, and they're participating that way. So I think those are the basic elements. It's not, when you say it that way, it's not too complex, but when you think about it, it turns out we really haven't done that before in any of the services. There are some successes. JLTV, JDAM, for instance, come to mind. Those are both somewhat less complex systems than a future rotorcraft.
Thank you. Mr. Hirschberg, is industry really leaning forward on FVL, or would they just rather build Blackhawks and Apaches forever? What do you think?
Industry is absolutely leaning forward and recognizes the tremendous leap ahead in capability for next generation. This isn't just, I guess I'll say one reason for that is, we sell things on the industry sells products on the international market. There are advances around the world of other rotorcraft. Even though we currently have the best aircraft in the world, military aircraft, certainly in the commercial sector, that's not necessarily the same. So industry is absolutely investing in the next generation technology for the warfighter, and also for commercial and international sales. And so I think everybody sees the long-range benefit of next-generation technology.
And Dr. Graves, one question for you. We talked a lot about this, the importance of industry and collaboration. Every panel member has addressed it in some kind of way. But given you the consortium that you support, how best should members seek engagements with the government? Or how can we, as a team, better collaborate?
We have some pretty good mechanisms in place to support and enable that collaboration. We've collaborated with General Todd's group in PEO Aviation and in looking at the education that was necessary about other transaction agreements and supporting their educational efforts, but also we have others from government come to the VLC. Maybe they call me directly, and they've got something, a message they would like to get out to industry, or they are interested in industry knowing about a program they're offering. So it does serve as a focal point for that kind of communication. And then we're also supported, the VLC is supported by a consortium administrative organization. And that makes it a lot easier to work on some of these projects because the CAO manages the administrative and financial aspects of the consortium and in a way that's acceptable to the government. And that makes it a lot easier, particularly for small companies, non-traditional companies, to collaborate and work with the government because they're getting assistance in how to do that and in helping in preparing their responses, at least the form of their responses if it's a competitive program. And our prototyping projects are competitive.
Thanks. I would just add for General Ham and AUSA and the Army leadership, forums like this, I think, are incredibly important for us to be able to come together and better collaborate, not just in where we are now, but on the floor, visiting industry, et cetera. Very positive. Anyone else?
Yeah, sir, if I could add to that. So I absolutely concur with that and urge the Army and the services to do more outreach. We're an international organization, so we have international members from around the world. We have international attendees at our events, and as mentioned, we're the vertical flight technical meeting, the annual forum, and especially in this upcoming event, having such a small limit on the vertical flight researchers and developers in RDECOM, I think is detrimental to the workforce and the warfighter. In past events, we've had more with some of the travel and attendance limitations. We've had more attendees from Turkey than the U.S. Army. We've had more attendees from Germany. So it's a very competitive world out there. And so I would really encourage the Army and their services to look at opportunities like this for industry and the services to work together and collaborate and talk.
Thanks, Mike. Next question. And this, I think, is important because many of us have lived this also, but are other services, including SOCOM, interested in your light attack aircraft efforts, and how are they participating within the CFT? Maybe General Rugen first, and sir, if you'd like to.
Yeah, and I think it's larger than that, but yes, certainly SOCOM is participating in the requirements integrated team that is headed up by Colonel Ramsey Bentley on a routine basis. But all the services are participating, and we even have international participation with the UK, Canada, and Australia as a few notable participants. But this all predates the CFT. Again, I think the future vertical lift effort has been ongoing for quite a long time, and Fort Rucker and the TRADOC Capabilities Manager have been working these integrated teams for quite some time. So the communication is pretty strong across all the services and internationally, and that's important.
I would like to touch on the special ops kind of perspective, and there's a reason why we selected General Rugen to be the CFT director, because he's got a special operations background, and those that know what the 160th has done both operationally and also developing systems for the nation. There's a reason why we're doing that. There's a reason why General Donahue was selected to be the cross-functional team leader for the soldier lethality because of his background. And our special operations forces have a different system. It's much quicker than ours, and we are certainly looking at what they're doing and then collaborating them as we go forward. They have many of the same needs. They need to find things, they need to kill things, and they need to move things, so we share the same interests in what we want vertical lift to do. And as we move in the future, we certainly want to move with them, and I personally met with the senior leadership of the Marine Corps to make sure that we share a vision in what we're doing, what they're doing as we go forward on this endeavor.
Another key and critical question, first to General Todd and then others on the panel. Is successful transitioning programs from science and technology to prototyping and then production just a matter of drill? Where do you see the challenges? Second part of that question, who should decide when something is not, when 90% of something is good enough? Is that the PM, the PEO, or who within the Army leadership should actually make that decision?
So first, one of the reasons they call it the Valley of Death is because nobody and nothing is in it. There is largely an absence of resources or focus when we come to the point of transition of things from experimentation and demonstration to actually productionizing and building. And so I think one of the benefits of the Futures Command, well, it will put people intentionally right in the middle of that are decision makers for the Army, and it'll put the appropriate resources in there. So it is not just a matter of the process. It's a matter of leadership and leading through it and making key decisions and the right folks in the Army making those decisions, which gets straight to the second point. PMs and PEOs don't make decisions regarding whether or not something is acceptable to the Army or not. We execute programs on behalf of Army leadership, but PMs and PEOs largely are there to execute that disciplined skill set that's required. However, leaders in the Army, well above me, well above my PMs ultimately, and I'm sure Wally will tee a lot of those decisions up for those senior leaders, will make those decisions.
I think the other thing I'd just add to is we want to do more experimental prototyping, competitive prototyping, and tech demonstration to get the science, the science and technology efforts far more mature before we hand them off. We feel like that's going to be a way to really shave off significant time in what any typical aircraft or the average is a 15-year process. Well, that's a non-starter. We cannot take 15 years for these future aircraft. So we're looking very much at a far more agile process in S&T, but again, we got to put the resources so that the handoff is clean and decisions.
Yeah, we had this discussion, and you know, we're certainly from the leadership side. You know, we want to get. We know that there's always going to be things we want to improve on any type of system we bring on, and people say, is 80% good enough? And what we would say is maybe. It just depends what the 80% is, and you know, 99% may not be good enough if it's a life, health, or safety type issue. And so as we move forward, you know, we want to get the system into the hands of our soldiers or our pilots, you know, as soon as we can do it safely, understanding that it's going to be the A model and there's going to be room. And as we build these systems, what we really want to do is look into the future, say this is what we need. We know it may not be there yet, but we can see a path to there, whether it's a version, it's a block, it's a different model, but get it into the hands of the troops as soon as we can, and then incrementally improve from that known point, which is much further than we are right now. And that's kind of the path we want to take as we go forward. That's why it's really important for the leadership to be involved, because we can make those type decisions at our level.
Yeah. So I think that would be great. Industry has shown, as I mentioned, with advanced manufacturing capabilities, the ability to do rapid prototyping to deliver things, even very large systems. You saw that with Valor. You see that with Raider. And you see that a lot now with the electric VTOL community, where private capital is going in, developing. You know, there's 50 different electric VTOL companies out there developing innovative technologies. I think what one of the issues with aviation procurement in the past hasn't been, is 90% good enough or is 80% good enough? It's when the requirements become 105% or 110% of what was originally spec'd. So it's a requirements creep that's, in my opinion, is one of the biggest roadblocks in developing and delivering capability to the warfighter.
Good point.
Sir, I think this is one of those areas that obviously needs a new way of doing business, and I certainly hope that the CFT can help to implement some of those tools that are out there. I mean, the Valley of Death has been around for several decades, and we're still struggling with it. One tool that's been suggested, I haven't seen it used yet, but Congress extended the other transaction authority this past year to allow the transition from prototyping into production without another competition. Now, it's easy to say that, and I'm not. It hasn't been done yet, and certainly there are going to be some in industry that will have to change the way they do business as well.
Yeah, we're looking at those more agile contract avenues as well, the OTAs and the TIAs, looking at them very hard.
I mean, you know, when we often talk about prototyping systems, you know, what we're doing right now is trying to prototype a process, if you think about that. And, you know, we don't have it perfectly right yet, you know, and just like any time you design something new, we don't have it perfectly right, but we're going into this knowing that we don't have this exactly right. And we're spending a lot of time at the senior leadership meeting with senior members of industry. We're meeting with, you know, Congress. We're meeting with, you know, all the, and helping us work our way through this, because we know what we have is not working the way we want it to work. We know we have to do something different. We have some ideas. We can, you know, certainly look at the process and go, hey, the way we're lined up right now, it's a linear process that is not designed to get things, you know, quickly and timely and costly, and it doesn't work for anyone. So that's what we're trying to do right now, and that's what really Futures Command is going to bring to the table, and we don't have that exactly right yet, so we got to kind of work our way through that. And we're open to constructive feedback. Thank you.
Great dialogue. Jeff, question. And I open this up for the panel, but Jeff, if you could respond first based upon your background, I believe. Vertical lift is not purely a U.S.-only domain. Does exploration and dialogue with non-U.S. military allies and partners, to include non-U.S. defense industry, figure into FVL planned approaches based upon what you know, what you've done with RAND?
Well, so I have to admit that I'm at least a year out of date with what FVL is doing, so I'm going to put that part of the question aside. There's nothing inherently wrong with international participation or non-defense industry participation. In fact, there's innovative ideas. Those are both sources of innovative ideas that could be useful for the Army. The same kinds of lessons, though, apply, right? I mean, you don't want your international partners to have different requirements than you do. The non-defense industry isn't really used to dealing with the military or government in general, and that actually is a significant issue sometimes. But there are also mechanisms to address that. OTA is one of those mechanisms that can be successful in bringing in non-defense. So yeah, I think it's possible, and there's no reason not to encourage it. It's when you get to that first formal program, how are you structuring management and the participation there? At that point, one of the lessons from history is for any joint program or even a lead service kind of program, you need to codify what the rules and the processes are so that all the participants actually know, okay, this is how we're going to do it. If there are disputes, this is how we're going to resolve those. And MOA.
Any other comments from?
Yeah. So I worked in the JSF program office from '93 to 2001. We did some different reports and analyses and histories of the procurement process. But one of the things that struck me was when the admiral who is in charge of the program said, because they had so many international partners, that helped the program go. That helped it keep going because they had international agreements, and that helped keep the U.S. in the program even through the dark years when not only was the acquisition process, but the technology wasn't quite there as well.
Political support.
Exactly. So, I definitely see when the FVL is like the difference between an old flip phone and a smartphone. It's a whole new generation of technology, and it's not just the medium class. It's the entire. It's replacing all of the DoD's current aircraft from small, medium, large, and so it's going to be revolutionary in nature, and absolutely industry wants to compete for sales, and just like we've got our industry's got their aircraft worldwide, we think that the revolutionary capabilities of future vertical lift will be really help the American industry, and I think encouragement of international participation and even international industry. I think it's going to be very beneficial for the defense industry and for the warfighter ultimately and the taxpayer.
Great comments. I would just add that foreign military sales and what we do, what General Todd does to sell many of those aircraft to our dozens of allies and partners becomes key and critical. Next question, General Rugen, I think this would be to you. In your assertion that the U.S. Army leads tech and VTOL, have you looked at racing drones, for example, the $1 million prize offered by Dubai, won by a 15-year-old augmented and mixed reality HUD NVIDIA Research? That's from Dr. Tom Hughes, who's out there.
So we have looked at that. I met with DIUX, and they have an eVTOL program there, and we signed a letter of interest just to watch it. We've looked hard at companies that are doing augmented reality. Again, we want that cognitive offloading for our cockpit. And so when we talk about optimally manned, or fully manned cockpits, we're certainly in that space as well. The one thing I want to challenge, and again, on our UASs, we're all in there too for the key attributes I already listed, the swarming and such. But batteries, you know, today are problematic, as I've gone to school on this. And the best Tesla car out there has a battery that has 170 watts per hour per kilogram. And that's the best one. A gallon of JP8 is 12,000 watts per hour per kilogram. And so we really got to close that gap if battery technology is going to be something that fuels our vertical lift of the future. We're certainly watching it. It's compelling to watch, and we're learning from it. But there are certainly some big challenges out there. The last thing I'd say, too, is that batteries are kind of, again, I've gone to school on this stuff, specific energy. So specific energy, think cruise control. It can keep you going. But we need specific power when we jerk the guts out of a helicopter to be agile on an objective, and batteries aren't good at delivering that collective thrust that we might need in a high power setting. So we have to close that gap with batteries as well.
Sir, if I may add to that, so as mentioned, there is about $1 billion going into electric VTOL technology. There are aircraft flying today, 4-passenger, that can basically electric tilt rotors that can transport. And one of the great things about it is a reduction in noise. But yes, they have about 1/20th of the specific energy as fuel. But by converting to a wing and flying as an aircraft, it's not there today, but 5 years, 10 years, certainly for smaller aircraft. So maybe having a silent eVTOL infiltrator could be a tremendous asset for special ops. Unfortunately, it may also be an asset for our adversaries to be able to take an urban air taxi aircraft and fly it where we don't hear it and infiltrate or insert people. So it's definitely an incredible capability for a potential for electric VTOL. It's certainly not there today, but I think in the next 5, 10 years as they become operating commercially, that there's tremendous opportunity and considerations or challenges we need to consider.
General Todd, comforting to hear life cycle costs mentioned first in presentations on new programs. How are you changing the culture to keep the top metrics of cheapest and fastest delivery from once again forcing very high sustainment cost as warfighter and sustainment community? How do you grade your progress and the results, and how does the rest of the panel grade the same measures?
So quickly, all our programs undergo a life cycle cost estimate. We certainly have to address that. I talked before about well-intended initiatives that have unintended consequences. One of the benefits of assessing life cycle costs at all key gates in any program life cycle is essentially that we make an affordability assessment across the Army. And that is not taken lightly. As the Vice said, we cannot afford, given that we go at scale where no really other service goes in the way of quantities that we procure. We cannot afford a premium solution that might only need a fleet of 100 to 200. We're going to buy significant amounts of vertical lift assets on the battlefield, both manned and unmanned, both optionally piloted and autonomous, as well as manned in the future. And so arguably, life cycle cost is most important to the Army of any of the services when it comes to vertical lift. We will continue to assess and advise accordingly. But I would encourage you, as you work through some of the S&T transitions, as you work through some of the prototypings that you're working through, take that into account. Remember, I mentioned 4 things that when Wally hands me a prototype and says, okay, I need you to really make this thing doable, ultimately what my team will get after is reliability, affordability, producibility, and survivability. And those 4 things are paramount in our mind. So we'll continue to keep them there.
And that's on the forefront of what we're doing in the CFT as well. So the parametrics are kind of dated that DASA CE and CAPE use, or the Navy dated. With what we've seen coming out of the automotive industry and spiraling into what is now the defense industry and what you guys are doing out there to just make your productions go from 19 days to 19 minutes. We need to understand that and bake that into our parametrics. And so one of the first things we did was get a bunch of ORSAs from Johns Hopkins to really look at that, what you guys are doing in your spaces, how you're innovating, and then how that can feed back into our parametrics so they're accurate. And so the affordability analysis that we're doing is far more precise.
Next, also important question, and General McConville, I'll refer to you first and maybe General Rugen. Do you believe the Army can afford the advanced FCL, CS1, and CS3 in parallel while modernizing the existing legacy fleet?
That's the big question. Depends on how much it costs. It depends what. No, I'm serious. It really, you know, and that's the trades that we're making at the senior level as we go forward. We're looking across the portfolio, and really, it's trying to find. We're watching what industry's doing, and we applaud industry for really going after. You know, I've got an engineering degree. I don't consider myself an engineer, but I do remember. You know, when you looked at helicopters, you can only go so far and so fast with the configurations we have. And now industry's actually trying to break that paradigm by going to different configurations that are going to allow us to have greater reach and greater speed. And we have to bring that together and take a look at how that technology is going to develop, how much we're going to have to invest in science and technology and research and development to bring that along. At the same time, we're going to be looking at the threat and looking how we're, again, modernizing the platforms we have, which are the best in the world right now, and we want to continue that progression. But there's a time out there, and again, that's the decision we're going to have to make, is when we can't afford everything. And we got to figure out when that is, and that's the decision that we'll be making over the next couple of years.
Sure. Yes, sir. It's conditions-based, so it depends on how good our development is, how quick it is, and when it meets the mission and meets the capability goals that we set, there'll be, you know, decisions, I would think. And again, we don't see our top line growing through the 20s, so what budget we have is what we have to live with. We'll have to live within our means, and so those will be important decisions. So it's important that we develop our capabilities and get a solid product out that can compete with the current fleet. Current fleet's pretty good, so this better be a lot better.
I open this next question up to the entire panel because I think it's important for much of what we do today. Vulnerability of systems and networks to cyber attacks is increasing. Who is responsible for software and hardware assurance in current and future platforms, weapons, and networks?
I'll tackle that up front. So information assurance, cyber security, obviously we have an ever-growing set of requirements on us, but that's what's one of the things our programs have to be agile about to keep pace with the threat. Ultimately, when we take a system that you may develop through what is ultimately developmental testing, seeking fielding release, at a minimum so that we can put it in the hands of the operational user for test. We owe it to that soldier to make sure that we've run the traps, developed the systems that are essentially segregated where necessary, and have the necessary protections in them that are required to operate on the modern battlefield. The difficulty becomes predicting the future, and so that's why when we talked earlier about get the initial platform out and then upgrade it over time, that will be one of the continuous upgrades that we have to perform both on the current fleet and the future fleet.
Yeah, I just want to touch, you know, as we look to the future and we talk about multi-domain battle, and really what we're looking for, and as we build our systems, is we're assuming that we'll be contested in every domain. So it's almost contested domain warfare. So if we're building a system, we're going to lay requirements on that can operate in an environment where you contested in cyber. We're going to put a requirement on that you're going to have to be able to operate where we're contested in space, and we're doing certain things to get after those challenges that we see. And again, you're certainly going to be contested on land as we go forward. So, you know, as we look to the future, that's the leap ahead type technology that we need, and that's going to be evident in the requirements that we put out.
One final question for the panel, and then we'll go to closing comments. We have many more questions here, so thank you, audience, but we're not going to be able to get to every one of them. For the entire panel, anybody who wants to respond. Considering the aircraft modernization programs for the reserve components, most of those are in the out years, if those programs are terminated in favor of FEL, what is the plan for RC reserve component modernization? Will FEL be fielded in the reserve components near simultaneously with the regular Army?
So, sir, I'll take it first.
You take a shot, and
I think, again, as we look at it, I don't think we're terminating any programs. The fleet is large. It's a near 4,000 helicopter fleet. So we will always maintain, or not always, but we will maintain the current fleet for quite some time now. And so I think that modernization will continue, albeit at a slower pace. Yeah, we're one force, and so there is going to be a plan to modernize the RC with FVL capabilities. We're one force. That's been clear from the chief.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that there'll be no decisions made, and right now, as we talk about the future vertical lift, General Dan Hokanson, who's the senior Army National Guard aviator and reservist, is on the team, and he's providing that insight to make sure that as we move forward, we're moving forward in unison, and the Guard and Reserve for aviation play a critical part of that, and they will have a voice, and we will make sure they are resourced as we go forward.
Sir, sorry to jump in too, but they're on my team, so both all compos are represented on the team.
For closing comments, about 1 minute or less for each panel member, and I'll turn to Dr. Graves.
Okay. Again, I would emphasize the importance of collaboration. I would say that industry fully supports the future vertical lift and believes that it is going to bring that leap ahead in capability that our warfighters need, and industry is excited to be a part of it. Secondly, I would say that the collaboration needs to include all of those that can say yes, as General Todd says, and that means the government side and the industry side as well. Collaboration has got to be pervasive. And my third comment is that the VLC is on the ground and up and running and ready to help out, and look forward to working with the CFT in whatever way makes sense.
Mike?
Great. So just to echo some of those things, the industry is absolutely leaning forward, and this is a long game. So FVL is looking at the transition plans over the next 50 years. In fact, this is something that the S&T community has been working on for 20 years already. We held a joint future rotorcraft conference in 1998. My predecessor testified to Congress in 2003 and 2005 expressing the need for a next generation rotorcraft program. That led to the congressional direction in 2008, 10 years ago, to start the FVL program. So working with the VLC and our industry partners, we've been able to keep the attention on the Hill. We've been briefing about 50 congressional offices every year, and over the last 4 years, that's brought an additional $50 million to the S&T line to support FVL. So industry, academia, and government all leaning forward on FVL. We're very happy that the Army made it its number 3 priority, and we all want to work together to deliver next generation capabilities to the warfighter.
Jeff?
So I think I would just again say that when you're making decisions about how to structure the programs, how to structure the initiatives, what the requirements for the first set should be, what technologies to use. Use the information that you have available. Remember the lessons from history about sort of overcomplicating both the decision processes as well as the system and the management structure that you're giving, so that you actually set yourself up for success. which is not something that a lot of major programs have done. My understanding of FVL, which predates the cross-functional teams, so I don't know exactly how that fits in. The FVL initiative was already doing a lot of things that we ended up seeing as sort of a best practice, early engagement with industry, some early prototyping, trying to get the Joint Council of Colonels and their IPTs that worked on sort of collaborating across the community. I think if you want some commonality and the benefits of commonality, those kinds of activities need to also continue.
General Todd?
Yes. So I'll say first and foremost, PO Aviation is committed to this teaming effort and certainly making sure that we do our part, whatever we're asked to do by the Army. I will say to industry partners, as General Rugen alluded to the fact that we're going to do things further in S&T than we've done them before, I will tell you that requires a commitment on both our parts, not just decisions, but commitments. And really where we need to be is we need to have more than 200-hour demonstrators in our hands to be able to make decisions and go fast. So as you think towards the future, as you think towards things that Wally talks to you about and my PM, Colonel Steve Clark, as well as my UAS PM, Colonel Courtney Cody, talk to you about, really think about taking it just to the next level. Help us to get it to a point to where we can actually take it in a test. And if we do decide that it is something we want to pursue, that we can go forward with it. It really is difficult on us when we look at items that are really shelved after a demonstration, and it's really not a usable asset. So it's a change in the model. I would encourage you to invest appropriately, and we look forward to seeing what we can do to get together.
General Rugen.
Thanks, sir. So, the aviation enterprise, the six-pack, you've heard it called, really feel like we're at an inflection point, similar to 2003, where we terminated Comanche and redirected all that funding into the current fleet that is getting us through the current conflict. We feel currently, again, we're at an inflection point for this near-peer competitors we see on the horizon. So the time is now. Develop these disruptive technologies, critical capability to fight and win in the future.
I would just add one comment from being your panel moderator. One of the takeaways I have from this is how tight the aviation community really is, and it's so important that they remain tight moving forward as we execute FVL. It's been an honor to be the panel moderator. Thanks to General Ham, General Swan, AUSA, the Army leadership for allowing me in this great panel to be here. Sir, closing comments.
Yeah, the one thing I was thinking about, which we didn't talk a lot about, but as we look at the future, if you look at across the spectrum of how we operate aircraft, aircraft have historically been manned, and that's been where our focus are, and we've had pilots and wearing white scarves and doing all those great things that pilots do, and now we've started moving to where we have pilots remotely operating, aerial vehicles, and in some places they're sitting in a container somewhere actually trying to fly that unmanned aerial, so they still have the scarves on, and then I don't know why they need them, but anyway, so then we go to the future and we start talking about autonomous systems and with artificial intelligence and machine learning, and really from where we sit, a lot of things are going that way. We see that happen in industry. We see autonomous cars coming on board. There's a lot of technology out there, so we're certainly going to be looking at that. But that's not a panacea for everything. And if you look behind us, you see a screen of me, but you can't see. If you were just watching that screen, you just get a sense of me talking. You can't see the person in the seventh row sleeping. No, I'm just kidding. It's back over there. You don't get that sense. You don't get that feel as we go forward. So we're going to be a balanced approach, but on the spectrum, we're going to be moving that way. We're going to see things coming out where we want optionally manned or optimally unmanned type systems. And we'll be looking at unmanned systems that, we talk about unmanned teaming. There'll be some, unmanned teaming as we go forward. And we're going to change because if we're going to put someone into a breach, if we're going to put someone into an integrated air defense situation, and we got to kind of open that up, we're certainly going to be looking at situations where we're not going to put pilots in that. But there'll always be a person in the loop. They just may not be in the lead aircraft. They may not be in the formation. But as we go forward, we certainly want to think that way. And as we go forward, again, we applaud industry for kind of trying to break the paradigm we have for helicopters today, because the future may not be helicopters. We may need to go further and faster than we need to do. We're going to see, just as we extend our long-range precision fires, we expect our adversaries to do the same thing. So that puts our forward armament and refueling points at risk. And so we'll need to go further and faster as we look in the future. And I'll just close again with, I've seen some very impressive briefings over the last day on future vertical lift, and we just look forward to flying those PowerPoint slides that we all saw. So thank you.
Please join me in a round of applause.
What a great panel. General McConville, General Phillips, and all. Thank you very, very much. Timely, informative, certainly relevant. I think, however, white scarves with pinks and greens will look pretty good. So, ladies and gentlemen, please be back at 1300, 1 o'clock, please.